In the ancient age of magic and mankind, a noble wizard stood on his tower and proclaimed that the powerless people below were under his protection. In his youth, he had seen the harsh natural world. Before mankind had learned of great magics, sciences and technologies, the way things were tormented the poor people around him. Sickness had stained their souls, hunger howled like thunder, colds caught and killed most, the beasts were bloodthirsty, and one was lucky to live long enough to labour new life. Lives and skies were dark, until the young wizard proclaimed no more. The young wizard commanded the forces of the wilds to fall to his will, bending and burning and breaking to best suit his people. He raked the lands for their power, tearing tremendous energies and burning them up to forge the world anew and to assure the safety of his people. And it was so. Diseases died out, starvation subsided, frostbite was forgotten, the wilds were weakened, and lives were long. The empowered people did not just survive, but lived and loved in this land of plenty, a paradise for many. But this was not to last forever. He and his people burnt more and more to better their stance, and they bruised and abused until the skies began to bleed. The more lands they littered and leached, the less it flourished. The forest forgot how to lift their infants high, so they died, leaving only barren stumps that once were living trunks. Horizons were lit with the wildest of fires. The seas grew sickly. The soil itself sank into sludge that brought naught for the people as they fell back into hunger and fear. The wizard looked down upon these new threats under the reddening skies and claimed he had more work to do. Standing atop his tall tower, his blood boiling under the painful power, the wizard battered the bloody skies as he lashed and laboured to liven the land around him, but nothing would heal the ailing ground. The skies bled redder than before, and the fields crumbled more and more. New pestilences plagued the people, and crops ceased to grow as they reaped what they did sow. Fires smelted as winters melted, and the people perished as burning floods sunk their false paradise. The wizard had no answers for his fearing folk, and sought to seek out a higher power, and so he ventured out under blood-red skies as he declared to his petrified people no more. His feet reluctantly led from his lands that were dead under the artless artifice and corrupting shadows, and into the warm lands of the wise old farmer of the magical mountains. Up the peaks and down the streams, the noble wizard soon found the home from whence he came. It was primitive compared to his own, but with much less to satisfy. The only inhabitant was a farmer, who stood under her warm skies. The farmer embraced him home and heard his struggles. She nodded and calmed him before seeking to solve his troubles. To stop a bleeding wound, she said, one cannot bleed it further, and to choke the land to force a breath will only make things worse. You cannot continue down this path. The wizard stood up to her and reasoned, for the world before was frail and wrought with wickedness. He told her that he had used his powers positively. He had ceased sickness and saved the starved. He had quelled the great cold and had become the master of monsters. The people lived longer under his guidance. He told her that he could not go back to the way things were. He could only go forward and burn the sickness back. The farmer calmed him and informed him the consequences of such an act, wherein new woes would wax and worsen until ingrained as irreversible. To stop the spread of flames, one must stop setting things alight. The wizard nodded and hung his head before he turned, surrendering by saying no more. He returned to his panicked people, who were eager to hear if he had found a solution. Upon explanation, the people were in uproar. Some demanded they endure under additional defences and keep things as they are, while others peddled wariness towards the wizard's words, or perpetuating the paradise that pleased them. The turmoil and strife lasted a time, and blood rained on the land as well as the sky, as the fearing folk fought for what they wanted, forgetting about what they needed. Soon, as the bleeding skies grew thicker and the people grew sicker, none could doubt the need any longer. The people hung their heads low and conceded to the wizard's will. All manner of magic, sources of science and tools of technology were abolished at once. They rejected unnatural instruments and actions outright, returning to the old world their ancestors once knew too well. The bloody burning skies were smothered by the dark black clouds of unending night. No source was stolen from, no environment exploited, and no nature enslaved. The wizard forced mankind to reject any man-made machine or artificial action, and to wholly give in to the natural world, as he believed it must be. Living beneath their needs, sickness resurged, and famines unfurled, frostburn returned, and savage snapping beasts emerged, empowered to attack, and the length of life was greatly lessened. Farms failed to flourish, and their sick were left to perish. The embers of their past settled like residue onto their latest efforts, singeing their soil to punish them more. They struggled to seek wild crops in their new wilderness. The scant systems in use could not provide for the people who pleaded and perished in place. Some, to relieve their hell, suggested a flash of bright light, some magic to cure their ails, while others, in fear and hate, turned to a flash of knives in the night to end those ails another way. With the aging taste of what they had still on their lips, the new wounds of the oldest worlds wrought dark minds amongst the people, the wizard included. He, from his high tower, striking through the dark, hopeless sky, looked down upon his people, a sick and sad sort, cursed to continue within a careless world. This was not better. This was not right either. The wizard left and said no more. Thrashing through overgrown grounds, the wizard wandered back up the magical mountain. As he left his amoral lands and broke through the shadows of his black skies, he entered again the neat and bright regions beyond. The stark separation between the two was like a dagger in his despairing heart. His thoughts were now less in awe and more in anger. How did such a beautiful word come to be if one could not interfere? If the natural world was so pure, why was his wrought with such suffering? Atop the mountain, the noble wizard sat again with the old farmer and explained his dilemma. Using magic and science and technology before had burned the world around them, and yet rejecting such instruments and returning to the natural state of things brought nothing but ignorance and illness. The farmer rested a hand on his shoulder and told him he had not understood her meaning. Progress, the farmer explained, was not a linear path where you can only go forward and backwards. You can go anywhere, in any direction, with any degree of speed or care you desire. And if there are no paths trodden down the way you need, you can forge it yourself. The wizard walked with the farmer as she showed him her lands. Her home was made of wood, and yet her forests were still full. She'd replanted the seeds. Her meals included fish, despite her small lakes still bristling with life. She had fished in moderation. Her sources of power were tapped into, but they remained unemptied. She had taken what she needed and given back when she could. The farmer explained to the wizard that she and her systems worked with the land. A rejection of the health of the world would harm all, but a total embrace of the amorality of the wild would harm the many who need the innovation and creation of mankind to survive and thrive. With magic, she explained, it was the same. Some energies are limited and must be protected, but others could last forever, like the wind and the waves, and they can be safely used. She told the wizard to use his powers wisely, know what to take, what to borrow, what to burn, bend, break, and what to protect, and what to heal, and what to give back, and what to better. Reject that which burns the skies and crumbles the ground, but never stay still. Seek out solutions to help the people survive and thrive. The holy natural world is pure but dark. The wholly unnatural is poisonous but clever. The farmer handed the wizard a hoe, and then, with her hand, tilted his head up high, telling him to help his people and to stay aware of what could be, not just what is and what was. The wizard returned to his poor people, who were cowering in fear of the 1,000 thorns and threats behind every tree. He handed mankind the hoe, and told them to wield this staff wisely, an instrument of a greater and more lasting magic than any spell or illusion, as it conjured civilizations from the ground up. The wizard then ventured upwards. The now empowered people below came out to witness him as he stood atop his tower, arms stretched wide. The black skies, clouding the red residue from days gone by, taunted him above. He took a deep breath and did not burn against the cold winds, but he bent with them, letting them guide him as their force flowed through him. He took the power it granted him, but he did not grasp it. Instead, he let the wind flow on through after he had had his fill of energy. He returned down to his people and began to heal the sick, feed the hungry, warmed the shivering, and cared for the creatures, burning up nothing that could not be renewed. The winds blew warmer as the fields were formed. Black skies healed, but did not give way to the rash of red. Instead, the sky was bright, and the sky was blue.